When I picture someone with a great meditation habit, I often think of someone playing soothing music in a room by themselves while sitting in the lotus position for 20 minutes, an hour, or more every day. As it turns out, it doesn't require that much to meditate. Not even close. This is the 5 a.m. Miracle, episode number 384. 1 Moment Meditation with Martin Boroson and Carmel Moore. Good morning, I am Jeff Sanders, and this is the podcast dedicated to dominating your day before breakfast. My two guests today run the 1 Moment Meditation Company, which provides a radically reframed approach to meditation training. With a book, an app, and digital training programs, Martin and Carmel have helped millions of people break through the time barrier and start meditating now. And now, here is my interview with Martin and Carmel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's just begin today with having the two of you introduce yourselves. I know you've got some interesting backgrounds here in the world of meditation, so I'd love to kind of hear a little bit of your backstory. So Martin, we'll begin with you.
Thanks, Jeff. I love that you're asking about meditation in the context of a productivity podcast and performance for people interested in performance, because my background is I went to business school many, many years ago and became a bit despairing that the only things you learned in business school were things like strategy and linear analysis and quantitative analysis, because I knew there was more to success and leadership than just those things. So rather than go to Wall Street, I kind of turned left and began to study what sometimes I think maybe inadequately called the softer skills, like psychology, meditation, the body, art. So I was interested in other ways of making sense of the world and being a leader. And it was only really when I discovered this approach to meditation that I now call 1 moment meditation that I started realizing how powerful and effective it could be in all walks of life, including the high performance leadership and business world that I had left. So that's when I began to bring that message back into the workplace and formed the 1 Moment Company with Carmel.
Excellent. And Carmel, what about you?
Well, Jeff, I've spent most of my career rejecting every form of meditation. And I'm a chartered accountant by background, was a tax director and a tax partner in places like the Fortune 500 and Big Four. So I absolutely broke myself on the wheel of productivity and, worked hard for many, many years over my career. And, had exposure in my life to things like NLP training and coaching training and organization development. But it wasn't until 2014 when I went for some spine surgery that I just assumed I'd bounce back from and be as productive as I ever was. I realized that wasn't going to be the case. I was going to take a long, long time to recover. And it coincided with me being involved in EY in their pioneering mindfulness program, which they had started to introduce really to just see how it would work in a corporate setting. So I was very fortunate to be part of that and really began to see the benefits, not just for myself, but for other people. But it took quite a long time for that to land with me. And I left EY back in the beginning of 2017, and I had a real mission at that time, which I still do, to ease the burden of working life and the working world. And I happened on Marty at a conference where we were both speaking on the subject of time and mindfulness. And we came together and created this joint endeavor to really help ease that burden of the working world. And meditation has proved so helpful and useful to the leaders that we work with.
Excellent. Yes, I think there's a lot of power there. So I want to dive into today in our discussion. So let's just open this up with this a little more detail on this concept of the 1 moment meditation. I think initially my thoughts around that are, it sounds like it's a short-lived meditation session. So I want to hear kind of the specifics behind like where this came from, what it actually means to do it. So Martin, can you give us a little more background on that?
Sure. So I come from a sort of classical Zen meditation background where you sit for at least 30 minutes or 45 minutes at a time, and you do that many times per day in what's a traditional Zen retreat. So I really believed that meditation required a lot of time. And you did at that point, this is, 15 years ago I'm talking, you did hear a lot that in order to meditate, you absolutely needed 20 minutes twice a day, and you needed a regular practice. You needed to do it every day, or it wasn't going to work. But one of the things, there were many things that led me to the one moment concept. But one of the things was I realized that a lot of people were failing because they didn't have time for it, or they thought they didn't have time for it. And they'd been told you need a lot of time because somewhere in the back of our minds, because this is an Eastern practice that came to us from people who devoted their lives to it, somewhere in the back of our minds, we had the feeling that if you're really serious about this, you have to become a monk and join a monastery and leave your life for 20 years. So that really has affected the way we think about meditation. But something didn't feel right to me about that. It didn't feel right to be telling people you need a lot of time and that if you don't put in the time, you're failing. So that was one starting point for me. Of course, in meditation training programs at that point, people who didn't come back, people who didn't have time, people who didn't keep it up, were never heard from again. So meditation teachers really weren't talking to their customers and finding out what wasn't working about the teaching. So that was one starting point for me. Maybe I'll pause there. There's a couple of other starting points, but I think that I'll let that one land.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot. I think you touched on this idea of being a monk and going to a monastery. I think there's a lot to be said about, from my own personal perspective, when I've thought about meditation in the past, I always assumed there was a heavy investment of time, and that if you didn't, like you said, invest at least 20 minutes twice a day, that you wouldn't get the benefits. So I guess from that perspective, like what kinds of benefits can we expect from meditation, whether you're doing it for a shorter session or longer? Like where's the goal behind a practice like this?
Well, one thing we have to correct, maybe I'll jump in with this, is there's an assumption out there that meditation is relaxation, and that's really incorrect. Meditation is about being awake, and this is where the math to productivity, I think, will be particularly interesting for your listeners. Meditation is about being awake. So we have this idea, because you see in the papers or wherever, the internet or whatever, when they have an article on meditation, there's always somebody at a spa, right, who's completely checked out from ordinary life. Meditation is about being awake, but it's a relaxed wakefulness. It's a relaxed wakefulness. So it's probably more relaxed than our ordinary state if we've drunk 3 espressos and 4 Red Bulls, but it's relaxed wakefulness. Okay. So I think that's key to understanding the benefits, because if you are very stressed and if you are having all of the health problems that come from stress or are related to stress or are exacerbated by stress, then the relaxing side of meditation has a positive effect on all of those health problems, as well as kind of engagement problems like listening, empathy, speaking more clearly or whatever, because you're more relaxed, so you're more present and you're clear, right? Now, the awake side of it has to do with, are you on target? Are you saying what you want to be saying? Are you doing what you want to be doing? Are you distracted or are you focused? So the awake side of it helps bring us into greater performance because it sharpens our mind on what we're choosing to do in this moment where we pay attention. So all the benefits of meditation, including on things like decision making, brainstorming at one end, to benefits for chronic conditions like asthma or depression, or all those benefits come from the way it's relaxing and the way it helps us wake up, and finding that kind of sweet spot between them.
I was going to say, maybe Carmel can speak to this idea of meditation and benefits, and from, I guess, the leadership or corporate standpoint, as far as, what have you seen there from a practice that affects, those who are in the corporate world?
So I think the first thing I would observe is that we're in a real crisis of attention these days. By that I mean we're so distracted in corporate life. We've got so many devices, we've got so many emails, we've got so many notifications turned on that it's really difficult to be fully present and give something your attention. And, I've observed so many meetings where the most senior person rushes in late and they're still thinking about the last meeting they've been in. And, they hunt around and grab the slides and try to kind of engage and get on with it. And 5 minutes before the end, suddenly everyone's laptop starts beeping and everyone's phone starts beeping, and we're being notified about the next meeting that we've got to go to. So there's a real kind of poverty or crisis of attention. And I found a practice like one moment meditation, being able to introduce it into a corporate setting is so helpful, because it gathers the people in the room together for the purpose that they're there for, and really creates a break state between the last piece of work or the last tension they've been involved in, and allows them to clear their mind and gather with other people to move on to the next thing. And I think probably, Jeff, the thing I didn't make clear is, while it is a wonderful practice for oneself, it is equally, one moment meditation, a wonderful practice collectively. And I've worked with, big teams in a corporate setting where the weekly meeting kicks off with the one moment meditation. And I haven't worked with that team for 6 months, but I hear they've handed on the tradition. So I think the beauty about something like one moment meditation in a corporate setting is it doesn't take so long. So we're able to overcome the objections that people don't have time to do something. And it's pretty accessible. You don't need special stuff or a special place to go and do it. It's something that's available to us all the time. So in a corporate setting, something like that works beautifully and helps people gather, helps them focus, and gives them that clarity to move on to the next thing and the next thing. And I'll finish by saying that I think that problem of moving on to one thing and then the next thing and the next thing has really been exacerbated by virtual working, where we have these back-to-back Zoom sessions, and it is difficult to maintain intention and attention during the course of the working day. So that's why a practice like this fits beautifully.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. The idea of transitions from one thing to the next are certainly hampered by how busy we all are. But you mentioned this idea that a meeting might start with this practice. And so, Martin, maybe we can go back to the practicality of what it actually means to do this style of meditation. It sounds as though you can do this anytime, anywhere, any place. So can you give us more specifics around like what it actually means to meditate for one moment?
Right. So maybe, Jeff, I'll step back one step and then answer your question.
Sure.
Is that another insight that I had that led to this was that if you really understand what the great spiritual teachers are saying about the practice of meditation and how it relates to time, it's all about being present in this moment. You could spend 20 years at the top of a mountain meditating, and the great realization you have at the end of that is be here now. So I turned it upside down. I said, if the answer is be here now, why don't we start here now? And why don't we look at what we can do in this moment that's right here, rather than think about needing 30 minutes some other time? Because there's something right here, and it's just as good. In fact, it's the only thing we only have right here. So the whole thought about how long do I need to meditate for, or when I should meditate, or where I should meditate, is actually a distraction from the opportunity to focus your mind and become more present right here now in this moment. So the reason this works, and we've done lots of testing in organizations about how asking people to do just this has an effect. I think the reason it works is because there is actually enormous power in being present in this moment and not giving in to that part of you that wants to postpone it or delay it or schedule it some other time. So with that, does that make sense, Jeff?
I love that perspective. I think that
Okay.
hits the nail right on the head as far as I think
Exactly.
the biggest reason why we don't meditate is that we're trying to schedule it for later. I love the idea that we don't have to wait.
So what we've done is we've brought the medicine to the problem. So if you're tossing and turning at night and you can't sleep, this happened to me, I'll speak for myself. I was tossing and turning when I couldn't sleep, and I was desperate to sleep because I had a big day the next day. And I was like praying to God, saying, please let me have some sleep. And if you let me have some sleep tonight, I promise I'll go on a meditation retreat next year, you know? And then suddenly it hit me, wham, it's like, meditate right now, if only for a moment, one moment. And then you feel a little bit calmer. And then another moment, like stop delaying it, stop deferring it. So by helping people realize not just that they should practice one moment meditation maybe as a routine, as a daily practice, but when they get stressed, when they get triggered, when they're distracted, when they're about to kick the dog, when they're about to hear difficult feedback, when they want to get their mind in the game. There are all of these junctures throughout the day that if you know meditation only takes a moment, you can apply it right to where you need it rather than imagine going to a retreat next week. So one of the successes is it's so applicable or can be applied. The actual technique then, we actually start with a minute. And we start with a minute because it's a nice discrete amount of time. You can find it on a clock. Everybody knows where it is. You can measure it. And people, particularly in our modern world, like things that are measurable, right? Mm-hmm. So you're going to do a minute of meditation. And we ask people to use a timer, or we have a free app that you can use, but everybody's carrying a timer in their pocket now, to actually time a minute. And, when I first came up with this idea, I thought it was ridiculous to time a minute. But what I realized is that you could spend a lot of time in your meditation worrying about time, and when is your meditation over, and how long is it taking, because your sense of time will get distorted in a meditation. So you really want to have somebody holding time for you or keeping time or just using a timer so you can let go of all the anxiety that so many people feel around time. And then the practice is very simple. It's simply noticing your breath moment by moment. But it's this moment and this moment and this moment, as if each moment were brand new. If you get distracted, it's back to this moment. So it's a very classical meditation instruction, but we teach it in a way that removes all the shame and all the blame and makes it doable for people because it only takes a moment within the context of a minute. So that's interesting because we start with a minute, but it's about using that minute to make yourself more present in the moment. Because somewhere in that minute, there was probably a moment where you let go of everything that was stressing you or that was worrying you, and you were fully present.
This sounds like a practice, is the way you're describing it, that you could, it's like a muscle that you could work over time and improve. I feel as though just the simple act of saying, let me acknowledge that I have a moment and take 1 minute and do this practice, that you would get better at it to the tune that you could do this frequently throughout the day. Is that the intention? This the kind of thing you just call upon at a moment's notice to do this, recurringly?
Yeah, you've got it exactly. The idea, what I tell people, and they get very shocked when I say this, is never do it longer than a minute. It's not a baby step to longer meditation where you kind of get good at the minute and then you do 5 minutes and then you do 10 minutes and then you do 30 minutes and then you join the meditation marathon. It's not an endurance sport, right? It's a natural impulse we have. We want to get better and we think longer is better. But in this case, quicker is better.
I was just thinking, like, to that degree, because my tendency is to do what you just said, is to keep pushing the envelope to go further and further. But I think from that angle of, I'm going to say time management or productivity or trying to acknowledge what's happening, if your tendency is to do what I do, which is to continue to go longer, I think that would probably be a deterrent to doing it in the future. I like the idea that because it's capped at a minute, it's something you can always call upon.
Yeah, Carmel, you're our time guru. Could you maybe comment on how valuable it is to have that limitation?
Yeah, I think we're in the territory of micro practices here. And the fact that it only takes a minute really reduces the barrier to entry for people, because there isn't an excuse that says, I don't have a minute. And I've heard, you know, folks who've been through the training or one of our programs have got in touch maybe a year or so down the line after they've worked with us. And maybe it's a practice that they've stopped for whatever reason. But they've told me that since lockdown and the stresses and tensions of the circumstances that they're in, that they've been able to pick that minute up and find such a depth and refuge in it. It's like, I guess, diving back into a pool or a pond. It seems so much more than a minute when you're in it.
So, Carmel, how does this work then in the corporate setting? Let's go back to that example you listed earlier of, a meeting would start with this. Does that mean that everyone in the meeting would then pause for a minute and do this by themselves in a group setting, or how does that play out?
So if I give you an example of something I'm doing tomorrow, I'm doing a workshop on personal branding. And I'll start when the people gather, because I know they're a vibrant and busy bunch of people, and they'll all have come to me from many different ways and many different interactions. And I'll start with a 1-moment meditation, but they're a new group, so I won't necessarily tell them it's a meditation. I will reframe it as a gathering and the start of something. And then what tends to happen is people enjoy the experience so much, and you can see them on screen, they open their eyes and they look around them and they think, I would love to do that again. So I'll often use a reframe to really make this applied. So it isn't necessarily that, and I hope this makes sense, that I'm asking people to do a meditation. I'm inviting them to arrive. I'm inviting them to gather. I'm inviting them to start work. I'm inviting them to finish, because we may do a 1-moment meditation at the end. So as a way of applying it in practice, it's less about the meditation and more about what it is in a business context that you're trying to do.
Yeah, I like that focus primarily because I can imagine the start of most meetings, which you mentioned are hectic and people are busy and they're coming from previous engagements. I think the invitation to just be present, even acknowledging that for a minute, I can imagine that changes the dynamic of those who are there. What have you seen from a reaction from people? Do they find this to be like initially beneficial, or do they think it's bizarre or strange, or how do they respond to that?
So we often ask people, when we check in with them when they arrive, and then after they've done the meditation, we often check in and say, how are you feeling now? And there's often this note of surprise and joy in their voice when they say, I feel peaceful, or I feel ready, or I feel alive. So I would say, Marty, we meet with very little resistance, if any.
I haven't met any resistance. I've been teaching this for years.
I would agree. Yeah.
If I could pull two things together, that question we asked people after their first minute, do they notice even a slight positive shift in their state of mind? It's kind of mind-blowing to people who've never done it before that they can do that in just a minute, and that they had the power to do that. Because we tend to project things onto the world as causing our problems. But when people realize they can change their state of mind and that it doesn't take long, that in itself is a powerful learning that longer meditation doesn't necessarily teach you. So one of the reasons we keep it to a minute is because of kind of the meta training, Jeff, is that you can make a meaningful change in your state of mind quickly. that's a massive learning for people. So that's keeping it to the minute has this extra value. And then to go back to something you asked before, Jeff, about from a training point of view, which I really loved your question, by keeping it to a minute, those of us who like training and measuring and metrics and exercises and performance and things like that, realize that within this framework that's called a minute, which doesn't really exist, right? It's a convention. But within this framework, and it's a really good framework because we work a lot with engineers and coders and doctors who are very more analytic, you can go deeper and deeper and deeper. So it's a different kind of training. And it becomes quite miraculous to people how deep they can go in a minute, and even, get this, how long a minute starts to seem when you're comfortable with it. So when you practice the minute, when people do it the first time, they say it goes by in a flash. But as you keep practicing it, of course, it's always a new minute. It's not the same minute, but it's still timed like a minute. Each time you do it, the more quickly you relax into it and trust it, the more sense of spaciousness you find there. So you kind of go, wow, I have a whole minute to unwind my mind.
Yeah, it seems very counterintuitive, but I see where you're going with that. I love it. That's good.
Yeah, it is very definitely counterintuitive.
Yeah, I mean, from that perspective of practicing the 1 minute meditation, do you also incorporate longer meditations throughout your day, or is this just the only practice that you're focused on?
This is the practice that we teach as an organization. I personally practice longer meditation as well. And they have distinctly different benefits and even some, in the case of longer meditation, some negative consequences potentially for some people. So they're different, and I like both of them.
So I guess from this perspective, it sounds like the kinds of people I would imagine who will respond to this the best are those who are the busiest. I know that from my perspective, I tend to be. It's been harder for me to adopt meditation in the past as a practice, but I feel as though this seems so much more palatable for me, and I feel as though other people who maybe are type A or have busy schedules, I feel like they would gravitate towards this faster. Have you seen that that's the case, that those who are the busiest and the most stressed tend to find this to be the most helpful?
Yes, absolutely. That's why as a leadership organization, we work with a lot of people like that. So it's very attractive to them. Absolutely. But it's also attractive to people who were nervous about meditating, had some concerns about it, or felt that they couldn't do it because the thought of a long meditation was intimidating. And we've even had success with this with children who have attention deficit disorder. Like, this is a length of time a child can do, a parent can do with a child. So it really gets over not just the busy obstacle, but a whole bunch of other obstacles.
Yeah, that's excellent. I love this practice. I think there's a lot of applications for it and a lot of scenarios. Carmel, do you have anything else that you wanted to discuss, I guess, from that perspective of leadership or from, I guess, a team dynamic, how this plays out?
I think one thing I would add is that when you work with high performers, they often don't embark on things that you might suggest because they have a fear of failure. And I think when I have seen these high performers experience a 1 moment meditation, the absolute joy in the fact that they've succeeded at something is just remarkable. And we don't often during the working day get that chance to experience and celebrate success. So I think it is really helpful for those who fear failure because it is so accessible. My own experience of trying meditation was just that. When I started first, I would always embark on a meditation, a longer meditation, feeling in advance that I was probably going to screw up. And that's why when Marty introduced me to 1 moment meditation, it's been such a boon because, you have each moment within that minute and that's available for you. And that gives you such a sense of achievement. And I don't know, just it's been really, really helpful to me, both in terms of, performance and getting ready for things, but also in terms of personally for chronic pain management after spine surgery. It has been just of application in many different areas in my life.
Yeah, I can imagine there's a lot of benefits in terms of those who are trying to work through something like that. I myself, I had back surgery 2 years ago. I have a similar story in that sense. I know that there's a lot that can be said in terms of using a practice like this to not just address, I guess, moments of stress, but also maybe physical pain or other health goals you have in mind. It seems I love how powerful and simplistic this practice is in terms of just the ability to call upon it at a moment's notice. I find that for most, I think my listeners will definitely gravitate towards this.
Wonderful. And I would stress as well that what we are as a company, as an organization, is to help individuals, leaders, organizations experience what's truly powerful and the potential of being present in the moment. So everything that we do, which is also about how we use time and how we're productive or not productive, is really about unleashing the power of the moment and reminding people that there's an opportunity right here, always right here. And that's why this meditation practice is paradoxically, because all meditation practice should be doing this, but this meditation practice is unavoidably reminding people that it's right here and it's right now.
Very true. Is there anything else about this practice you want to mention as we close?
I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, certainly. Well, this has been wonderful today. I've really gotten a lot out of this. I think that I can feel that I'm going to use this practice a lot. There's a lot here to be said about pausing at a moment's notice. So, Martin and Carmel, has been a great conversation. I hope our listeners can get more from you. And from that perspective, where can they go to dig into the work you're doing now?
So the first thing is there's a free app called a 1 Moment Meditation, and it's available to, if people would like to hear me bring them through a minute. It's very simple, and its beauty is in its simplicity. And it also obviously reminds people to meditate at times of their choice or randomly at their choice. And then the larger framework of organizational and leadership consulting that we're doing, that's all based on the power of the present moment, is onemomentcompany.com, spelled out, onemomentcompany.com.
Okay, excellent. I'll have those links for our listeners this week in the show notes. And other than that, thanks a lot of you too. It's been a wonderful conversation, and I'm excited to hear the results from our listeners from applying this practice.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
For the action step this week, meditate. And try to do so right now. If you're driving, keep your eyes open and just breathe. Otherwise, during your next moment of stress or anxiety, take just 1 minute to collect your thoughts. Breathe on purpose. And meditate in a way that you otherwise might just postpone indefinitely. jeffsanders.com/384 is the show notes page this week. And that's all I've got for you here on the 5 a.m. Miracle Podcast. Until next time, you have the power to change your life, and the fun begins bright and early. And now, here's 1 minute of some nice, soothing music. Go ahead, meditate.